Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets take on the Washington Wizards, but we don't care. We're talking about the deadline, whether or not the Brooklyn Nets will move on from Cam Johnson, and the frenzy around big names. Are the Nets missing out by not getting in on the deadline action? We give our predictions coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Arbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms and let you know that Super Bowl 59 is here. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, full disclosure, right out the top, executive decision came down from the highest possible ranks, you and me. We were not going to bother waiting for the Nets-Wizards game to play out here before coming in to talk about trade deadline prep.
Yeah. What were we going to learn from Wiz? No matter what happens here in Wiz Nets, there's nothing we're going to learn about the team, right? Like, I think we're already too far ahead in terms of the season to think about just whether or not they're going to catch the Wizards all the way to the bottom. It's okay. No big deal. The game's going to be what it is. It's okay. We're going to talk trade deadline, like what we think is going to happen, what maybe is not going to happen. It's been one of the wildest trade deadlines already, and we're not even there yet. The Luka thing alone makes it the wildest trade deadline maybe in history. Then you throw in a little De'Aaron Fox. We're waiting to hear about Jimmy Butler, maybe Kevin Durant on the move. So I think there's going to be some stuff that happens here. Where the Nets land, though, I don't know. We'll talk about that. I think maybe some people aren't going to be so pumped about what we're going to say on that end.
Yes, and that's why we delay a little bit here. We're going to come back in on Thursday night. We'll probably post that as quickly as possible on our deadline recap, anything that did happen with the Brooklyn Nets, obviously. And we'll talk about Cam Johnson. But already, what we will say is, even though we're going to be in ahead of this game, the Wizards were involved with a trade. And I got to tell you, if you have a superstar on your team and you're trying to salvage the Giannis era in Milwaukee, gosh, the first name on the tip of my tongue is Kyle Kuzma to save the day. Chris Middleton, they make that trade. I mean, not that it matters in terms of what you can tell me what you think your impact's going to be there, but that is such the clear vision of what it means to be tied to a superstar, where at a certain point you go, I don't know, man, let's just try whatever we can here. Kyle Kuzma, okay, let's do it. Let's see if it means something for the rest of this season. I just can't see Milwaukee looking back in the postseason going, we knew when we got Kuzma that was going to turn the corner for us here.
I joked on Twitter today. I was like, Kuzma probably looks at Giannis and is like, oh, he's going to be a good rebounder for me. I
bet he clears the lane for me nicely when I tell him to.
He'll probably rebound pretty well for me, and then just can get out of the way, and I can put on the Kuzma show, put on the Kuz show.
Nice to meet you, Giannis.
It's one of those things like Giannis is 9 months from asking out. That's kind of my prediction on that one. This is the last. It's a shame. Middleton looks like the wheels have kind of come off for him. He was having trouble staying healthy. He's been on a minutes limit all season. There was times when he looked really good, but it was just unclear if he was ever going to be able to get healthy. They make a move to kind of just get out of it. The Wizards don't have to do any more business with Kyle Kuzma, who was, kind of starting to look like maybe a negative asset. So overall, I don't think it does anything for the Bucks. And while we're recording, Giannis just got ruled out very late scratch with the calf muscle. So who knows what's going to be going on with Milwaukee overall. But that's just one of those moves where a couple years ago, maybe you're like, oh, it's interesting. Middleton was a way better player, especially defensively, but he just couldn't stay really that healthy. And it's a shame that they kind of closed their window probably sooner than they wanted to. The Dame thing didn't work out completely. They haven't rounded out the rest of the roster. But, taking some of these teams out, it's interesting because not like Milwaukee was ever really in on Cam Johnson, but every one of these teams that kind of gets eliminated from any team that might trade for him kind of starts whittling down, the options around about anyone paying big numbers to bring in Cam Johnson, which is sometimes where you think about, is the market going to be salivating over him now? It's hard to think that it is, look, Stranger Things and all, but it's just it's kind of still hard to kind of see where some of these things are going to land.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about the Kevin Durant situation too with Phoenix, but Washington also at the time of the recording, a couple of hours ago, Shams Charania was reporting they traded Valanciunas to Sacramento for Sissoko and
Yep.
2 second-round picks. And it's like, the Kings way up to nowadays. They were once thought to be maybe in pursuit of Cam Johnson when it was still going to be De'Aaron Fox and everything else. So to your point, you just start to see some of these pieces move around. We'll probably see when the dust settles. Oh, what do we think? What were the shakeups in the Eastern and Western conferences? But from a high level, from a Nets perspective, it's, are there still interested people? Frankly, some of the bigger names that started to get talked about as we lead towards the deadline really shuffled Cam Johnson off the marquee billboard of this year's deadline. That's all that was talked about seemingly for a good month, was like, who's going to come after Cam Johnson? He's clearly the jewel of so many teams. And then Fox things break down. And now you see the Wizards and what's happening with Milwaukee. And coming up here in a little bit, we'll talk about Phoenix and superstar pursuit. Do you, at a high level, do you like it being on the outside of all of this chaos when it comes to superstar-driven teams? Because I think there's just such a reality to that. Like with Milwaukee, you start to back yourself into decisions that you objectively wouldn't make, in a normal set of circumstances, that you would not push yourself to do. I do find that part of it fascinating when it comes to the NBA landscape. When you have the star, or sometimes stars, you'll start to make some pretty wild decisions thinking that you can save something or push yourself over the top when it comes to championships.
I mean, it's always better to be in the deal with some of these superstars because it means your team's actually good. So the drama is the drama, but if the superstars bring the drama, but they kind of deserve to because they're the best players, and it's the only way you can really win championships and get really far. So you can't really have one without the other. I'm not surprised that there's like continuing drama around these guys because they know their values. They signed the biggest contracts in the world. They are the best players. They're the only ways you can really win a championship. There's no plucky upstart champions in the NBA.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. Like you can't, this isn't the Final Four here. Like you have to have the very best players. You can't just run hot. Not even like NHL where you this is like a little apocryphal, but like where you just, run hot with a goalkeeper through a bunch of games, right? Or the variance is super high. The variance is super high, like even in baseball at times, right? It's like, the Dodgers are going to win all these games and then get bounced in the first round. The basketball just doesn't really work like that for the most part.
Right. Lower seeds get bounced early in the playoffs. The best teams, the best stars always end up typically in the conference finals and finals. And that's the recipe. And everybody knows that's the recipe, right?
Yeah. Like in football, it's like, you got to kind of have Patrick Mahomes, or one of these great quarterbacks.
Last 7 years would suggest so.
Yeah,
it'd be good to have.
Like you just have a great quarterback. Like you can get away with it. You can Stafford your way every once in a while, but for the most part, you have to have the best quarterback. The NBA is the same thing. Like you have to just have one of these players. So attaching the drama to these guys makes sense because they're necessary to be really, really good. I mean, am I glad that we're not rolling through a Kevin Durant trade cycle? Yeah, probably, but it still means but it signals that your team is good and relevant and stuff. And we're going to probably spend the next few minutes talking about like how the Nets aren't going to be able to get 2 first-round picks for Cam Johnson. I don't know. That's the place you get stuck in when the superstar stuff doesn't work out.
Right.
Yeah,
that's the space you end up in. Yeah. While choosing not to wait for the results of the Wizards-Nets game before you decide to have a conversation about the trade deadline coming up here.
That's a great call. Yeah.
We're doing our episode about the trade deadline before the game's been played because that's what's more interesting when you're in these quarters. Coming up here in a second. Not only Cam Johnson, is there anybody else? Did Day'Ron Sharp getting just totally plummeted to the floor by Thompson on that rebound and all the speculation that somebody might want to add a plucky rebounder? We'll get into the net side of things at the deadline coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Basketball season's heating up. No better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. Over 10 million members, billions in awarded winnings. Prize Picks makes it easy and fun, both of them, to turn your sports knowledge into real money. So easy to make it work too. You just go more or less on at least 2 player projections. If you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. They even have a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. Am I reading this right? Yeah, only needs to throw for 1 yard in order for you to win that more or less bet. I'm going to go more on that one. Just, call me an analytics guy. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. By the way, with price picks, it doesn't just need to be per sport. You can just pile all these for different sports, different stats. It's all there, like with basketball, points, assists, blocks, rebounds. It's all so easy to do. You check out the promos tab. You can tail us any of those super sweet Millie winners, big game lineups. You tail that lineup. You can go 3 for 3. You can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. You're hearing all the right numbers from this prize pick stuff. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize picks, run your game.
Are talking about the deadline, talking about the possibilities and some of this other player movement. We'll still get to Cam Johnson here, obviously, but I joke about Day'Ron Sharpe there a little bit. There was some low level, certainly from some fan pockets, about Nicholas Claxton needs to be out of here, got to move on from him. That contract never made any sense. I mean, do you think, let's just touch on the Nets for a minute before we talk Kevin Durant, another superstar angle, and Jimmy Butler as well. Do you think that the list, before we give our predictions on movement or not, is the list one Cam Johnson, or are there actually other guys that you think that teams would be calling about? We've talked about D'Angelo Russell before, maybe Day'Ron because it's an expiring contract. Are there any other guys in this roster in this moment that you look at and say, like, hey, maybe there's some low-level chatter here, even if it's not the big swings that we thought would be coming?
I could definitely see D'Lo getting traded. I don't think it's going to happen, but I could definitely see it. There are teams where he would help, right? Like we talked about the Magic.
It's hard to get rid of a guy with ice in his veins like that. It's really hard to do that.
I rewatched that shot a couple times. The Nets social posted a really cool angle from like a low left side court angle, it's an awesome angle, and you can see Jordy's reaction. And this is how you know he's a good coach. Just a little bit of reaction and just right back to business. And I was that's what a winning coach. That's how a winning coach operates. It's like a little excited, not really, and then right back to business, making sure that they're going to guard the inbound. Like I don't know. I like when these guys don't get too over the top. I think the D'Lo could definitely help another team, like a low-level playoff team that wouldn't need to worry about his contract later, could come in off the bench and score. I actually think like he will work for OKC. Like just bring in spell Shea, have another ball handler. He can run pick and roll with some of those bigs, like with Chet. I don't think the OKC will do it, and I don't think they would give up much to get him. But like, I don't know, he would make sense as a good alternative. Rest Shea and not feel too like you weren't going to lose too much in these games. I just don't know if it's going to happen. I think Mark's going to hold the line. I think that there's other reasons to kind of keep a guy like him culture-wise. He's been a really good teammate so far. Claxton hasn't done a single thing to improve his trade value. He's been bad this year. And so I just
did he give any of the contract back? Because that would help his trade value, but I don't think he did.
Contract still isn't totally crazy going forward, thankfully. Like it's a decreasing number, and I think it's going to be fine. He's been just so bad this year that I just don't know how another team looks at him and is thinking, oh, like we want to give up like a first round pick to get him his $20 million and do whatever. Again, put him on a good team where he doesn't need to have the ball much and he can just rim run. It probably does look different, but I just look at these guys and I just don't know how excited they're going to get when you combine other teams. I mean, and then when you combine it with, we know Marks just doesn't take 50 cents on the dollar for his guys. He just
dollars on the dollar.
He takes $1.50s on the dollar, right? Like that's
true, right?
He just doesn't do that. So I think when you combine those things, it's just really hard for me to see it. And I do think some of these guys would low level help other teams, but probably not to the point where Marks wants to pay, where they would be willing to pay Marks's price.
Yeah, and it's funny too, especially like with a guy like Nick Claxton, who I mean, this year has been, at least I think through our eyes, has been enough of a downturn that you're not far removed from this is what he looks like when he plays with superstar talent, when he has, Kevin Durant on the floor, right? And that is what teams are selling themselves on if they were thinking about making a trade for him. Even though we understand this is one of the least talented rosters in the league in Brooklyn, it's just, again, the eye test has not been great for him this year, to the point where even contract aside, it's just, I don't know how teams would look at him and say, this is going to mean X for us, right? If you're not improving our deep playoff run odds, then it kind of does become even harder to look for teams that would say, so we're battling for the playoffs and we're going to make this move for him. Now his age is a good sign. And you mentioned the contract descending is a good sign. That just probably for me, he feels more like an off-season kind of thing that maybe could happen depending on what the landscape looks like and how the draft goes for Brooklyn and other places as well. One of the things I want to flip
real
to
quick,
before we
like
talk,
one other thing about him is like if it was like I could see him making sense for the Lakers, right? Like you pair him with Luka.
Yeah, if you could find a way to get him, and yeah,
but they're just not going to be able to, right? And
Right.
so there are teams I think that would still actually probably look at him. Lakers are a good one, I think, where it's like, hey, we could use some rim protection. They don't really have anything like this Jackson Hayes or bust now. They could use some rim protection. They could use a guy that could switch a little bit, and Luka just like gets all these guys paid basically because he can just run pick and roll all day with them and it would be great. So like he would fit there, but do the Lakers have anything to give? I mean, they gave nothing for Luka, so maybe there's like something left, but I still can't get over that. But so I just do think there's places he would help. But last year when we were like, like trade him to OKC, like that I don't put on the table anymore. Right. And frankly, when we threw out like the Giddy for Clax thing, that looked kind of ridiculous after a while. And now I'm like, I don't know, that's probably closer than we thought at the time. But overall, I just don't think that other teams are going to look at the contract and look at the play this year and just be super jazzed to bring him in.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too when you talk about that Luka thing, which still blows as you said, blows my mind. But the idea that like the world where Luka, who can't make the Supermax anymore after being traded, but is not a lock, so to definitely stay in LA. What happens in LA? Is LeBron going to be there after this season? Is he going to stick around another year? Like, is he going to retire? Like all of those things. It would be next level fascinating if a year from now or 6 months from now when we're in the off season, if we were having the conversation of like, oh, maybe Luka wasn't going to stay in Dallas. Maybe Luka doesn't want to stay in LA. And at the end of it, we're actually sitting here going, maybe Dallas doesn't look so insane for getting Anthony Davis right now in this moment and having Kyrie Irving and maybe pursuing another player to bring in there to make themselves competitive in the short term, even though you're talking about a guy in his prime that you could be obviously building around for another decade. I find that fascinating, and we won't like have the full answer for another few months probably when it comes to the Lakers. The other thing too, just you mentioned, to have fun with it. You know how I love a good trade machine. You can put Jackson Hayes and you can put Rui Hachimura on the table. You still got to find another $8 million on the Lakers in order just to match contracts when it comes to a Nicholas Claxton. But like, say you could get the money the rest of the way there. Is that worth it for the LA Lakers to say like, hey, here's Rui. We have Dorian Finney-Smith. We already traded with you once. Jackson Hayes is nothing to write home about, and we got to fill in a little bit more. And they have a few contracts that are over, north of 10 million. If you like, would you make that move? Because maybe you're right. Like you have Luka and you still have LeBron, and you go and bring in Nicholas Claxton who can rim run and also give you defensive help that you desperately need around the basket. That is interesting, but I just don't know. To your point, I think it's the Sean Marks and where's the picks, like, and where's the other stuff that I want, right? Like the money match. I think they could do that.
Yeah, and I think the Lakers could probably look at this and be like, hey, Luka's so good that we can take people worse and cheaper than this guy and turn them into like sort of what we need, right? And so
probably true too, right? Yeah,
like this is kind of a replaceable kind of guy. These centers, not 100%, but you can just do a lot better. Like you can that's just not a place to spend 20 million or whatever when you have those guys. So I just don't think it's realistic. I'm just saying that I think that there are a few teams where he probably would help them.
Yeah.
Like I still think he would actually help OKC, but just not the number anymore. That's all.
And plus, I think
that's kind of where it is.
Who they get? Oh,
they got Tice, maybe.
Yeah, they got Tice. Yeah, they got Tice in a salary dump, so the Pelicans get below one of the thresholds. And like, not the same player or whatever, but it's all value. And this is, by the way, too, that contract for that value and what it brings to your team. You're dealing in different financial waters than a guy that's making 27 to sending money 4 years on a contract, right? Like that's a little bit these kind of lower level moves that some teams may be trying to make. Coming up in here in a second, though. What about Cam Johnson? Do we think the Brooklyn Nets are going to make any moves? Sean Marks, the rumor has it that he wants those 2 first-round picks, and he's right in that sweet wheelhouse of his where if he doesn't get the offer he wants, he's got no problem standing pat. We'll give our predictions for the Brooklyn Nets trade down the deadline. Coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. No better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Maybe you're predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss. Gotta love it. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. Live betting all game long. Adjust those bets as the game unfolds. Feel the thrill from the kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. App's super easy to navigate. Plus, you know you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. It's icing on the cake. Download the app or head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
All right. So as we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the deadline coming up, giving our predictions, obviously a lot of names moving around, but will the Brooklyn Nets be one of those teams? And by the way, just in case you're wondering, before this episode's over, we'll be able to give you a little bit of our own live reaction about the start of the Nets Wizards game, because it's right around that tip-off time coming up here in a couple of minutes. Do you think we can talk about Kevin Durant here too and all of that? Like I want to get to Cam Johnson here, and also I said at the top, like when you hear the rumor that Kevin Durant wants out, but he doesn't want out, just doing due diligence, no big deal, not a problem. There is a part of me is like, whew, it's nice not to have that, because it's brutal. And I don't know what Phoenix is trying. I know what Phoenix is trying to do. They're trying to get rid of Beal. They're trying to improve the team for Kevin Durant. It's not working out. And they're considering the idea of trying to reset themselves, because now you're going to be 2 full years into this and you're not going to win a championship. Like, it just doesn't look like that's going to be in the cards for Phoenix as currently constituted.
Yeah, it'd be wild if he got traded. Like, I don't think he will, but the fact that there's enough sort of fire or smoke with that fire, possibly, that they probably have at least considered it, with the hope that, like, right, they can drive Beal out, like get Butler in. I don't know. This is what happens. Like, you take these big swings, if they don't work out, it just looks so bad. It always looks so bad on the back end of it. Like, you should always swing for it. We all thought the trade was nuts at the time. Like, we thought there was a huge overpay by Phoenix. Good for the Nets. All right. Reset the whole franchise. Like, thank goodness they did it. But in the end, these things always end bad. It seems like, I just don't know another way around it. Yeah.
And I gotta say, man, like we said this back when we had Kevin Durant, and then the speculation started, even before that, when he was with the Warriors and everything else. Like, Kevin Durant's legacy, if he ends up getting, not even at this deadline, just if he ends up playing on another team before it's all said and done, his legacy does have a ton of just like kind of a dude floating around, swapping a lot of draft capital, but just bouncing around at these last handful of years of his career. And there's a lot of things that went wrong in Brooklyn. That's fine. It didn't come together even remotely in Phoenix to this point so far. Like, it's just really wild, man. And then you got Jimmy Butler the other day telling Golden State he wouldn't sign an extension there, so don't bother trading for him. Like, it's so fascinating to me. As we said at the top, stars are what win championships in the NBA, and that's why everyone's willing to do it. But gosh, is there a spectrum of people that you should want to go in on, and then you see the results on the back end as well. That being the case, not a superstar, but certainly a guy that can help a superstar, is one Cam Johnson. He's played lights out this year for Brooklyn. We know that. Maybe the best season of his career. They've kind of put him on ice here in the last handful of weeks, try to, feather him to the deadline. Yeah. But Sean Marks has been holding pretty fast, at least from all the reporting, that, 2 first-round picks, that's what we want. The point stop right there. 2 first-round picks, it seems to me, will be too much for any team to come to the table with. At least by everything that we're hearing. I don't think a team is coming with that. I think teams are coming with 1 pick, 1 player, and a player of some value, but it doesn't seem like, at least right now, the Nets are into that. Do you read it the same way?
Yeah, I will say if you want a little tinfoil hat, Cam Johnson comes back to play 1 game before the deadline, right? He's starting against the Wizards. So it's like,
just to show it off.
Like, well, that's convenient. Like, that's convenient timing. So I do like that part of it.
Yep.
I do not think that there's not going to be 2 first-round picks. As much as I don't think often that these like crazy trades reset markets, I think the markets for some of these huge players are just sort of independent. Like, you can't really compare it. Like, I don't think you can compare the Gobert trade to the Durant trade to the Luka trade, clearly, to the Fox trade. Like, I just don't think. I think each one is just its own little trade ecosystem. They are a little bit influenced, but in the end,
it does muddy the waters, though, right? Don't you think? Like, it shakes up NBA GMs where they just go, well, hold on a second, right? Because there's something that shifts.
Well, I think it shakes it up down chain. I think it shakes it up down chain for a guy like Cam Johnson. Like, that's where it screws up. Like, I don't think you can ever use the Luka trade to inform the net, like when Giannis gets traded, right? I don't think anyone's going to look back at the Luka trade and be like, well, this is what Luka went for. And people are going to be like, so, right? Like, that's an insane trade. It's like the same thing with Gobert. It's like, Gobert went for 29 picks or whatever. So that Minnesota was off their rocker. We're not using that as a comparison. So I don't think these guys come to the table with that stuff. Where I do think it matters is for guys like this, because it's like, well, I know this isn't right, but okay, well, Luka goes for AD and a first. It's like, we're going to give up 2 first-round picks for Cam Johnson, even if they're end of the thing. It's like, it's just a tougher pill to swallow. So I think it just hurt. Or even Darren Fox, when it's like, he's going to go for kind of no players, or, no real players back and 3 picks, right?
Yeah.
And so, because I don't think Levine even counts in there. And so I think for stuff like that, and by the way, we're the first people to be like, hey, not all picks are created equally. We totally get it, right?
Yep.
I just think that when you see these other guys go for that, I don't think it will ever affect a Giannis trade or another superstar trade, but I do think it starts to be like, wait, Cam Johnson, right? You know what I mean? I just think that's where it stops. And I think it hurts that.
And you know what it is too. Understandably, I'm not even knocking GMs for this, but well, I'm not going to be the guy that does that now. He said Anthony Davis for Luka and 1 pick. Sorry, I'm not going to, in the same deadline, give up 2 first-round picks and salary match, which could involve some players of some value that the Nets could turn around and flip at some point, right? And then someday when they hold it up in front of you, by the way, when the owners hold it up in front of your face and go, you traded 2 second-round picks and a player of real value days after Luka went to LA for AD and 1. Sorry, you're fired, right? So I think there is some management around that as well. And from a Sean Marks perspective and a Nets perspective, it just seems like Joe Tsai and Sean Marks, they have a good working relationship. It doesn't seem like there's ever this pressure around these type of decisions. They're winning some basketball games. We've heard they're going to be strategic, but you never hear anything where it's Joe Tsai frustrated with what did or did not happen around the trade deadlines. Even with the Kevin Durant, with everything that's gone on with this franchise in the last couple of seasons, you never heard ownership and front office in disagreement, not on the same page. They always come out after, they're like, yep, tried, didn't work out, new plan. And so that's the part where I think Sean Marks is very comfortable to be able to sit here and say, hey, we're not giving up unless we get what we like. One thing I do want to do here when it comes
to real quick, by the way, on that last note, real quick on that, and Marks, to his credit here, has been proven right on these other ones, right? He's grand slammed the Durant and the Mikal trades, no doubt about it, to the point where people use those trades to compare how crazy it's gotten for some of these other guys. So he's crushed those ones. They got crushed on the Harden one, right? He got crushed on both Harden ones, in and out. So it's not 100% hit rate, but he has extracted crazy value on, even Harden. No one knew Simmons was going to be this hurt. So it's no, I don't know. You got an all NBA player back when the guy was just was overweight and didn't want to be there. So I think even that one at the time, it didn't work out. It was a failure, but I think at the time you're like, oh, they actually did okay here. Simmons plus a couple picks, that's not the worst thing. And now, so I just think that he's proven himself right on holding that's why the ownership wouldn't be frustrated with it, because they reset the whole franchise with picks, basically.
When they say, hey, why not this or why not that? Like I was saying before, Sean Marks holds back up to Joe Tsai. Well, Kevin Durant, Mikal Bridges trades. I did these things. I got it done. I reclaimed some of our draft capital. At a minimum, Sean Marks has shown the ability to be like, hey, I'm going to pivot. Watch me pivot now. Watch me pivot over here. Watch me keep trying to regenerate some opportunities. Even though I know big part of the fan base will be in the comments on this one saying, what are you talking about? Sean Marks is a mess. You can't possibly. And I think that a lot of that is usually inspired by fandom, which is and passion, and that's awesome. But sometimes it's not banked in the facts of some of these things that go on. Real quick, I do just want to say, if we're giving our predictions out about whether or not the Nets are making moves at the deadline, the San Antonio Spurs, they remain really fascinating for me. I put them out there early as a team that should go after Cam Johnson before they had Fox. You're kind of we want to be competitive. We want to push up the standings here. We want to be in the playoffs this season and making some noise with Wemby there. Yeah. They can do that. They did give up in the Fox trade. A lot of the young players, they didn't give up on those guys. They still have a lot of things to work with there. That might be my sleeper, not sleeper for Cam Johnson. A team that looks like they are trying to make a bit of a push here, even over an OKC that clearly would be valued in getting him. But I think that the player piece of that is going to be too hard for Sean Marks to draw that line and say, this is what I want in terms of your young assets. Well, and OKC says, no, thank you.
Spurs have like a ton of. I like the Spurs have all these Hawks picks left too. Like they have these Hawks,
and that's why I think they're great.
Like like they have, and I don't think they're going to do it because these Hawks ones are going to look pretty damn good in the future. But it's just like they're an interesting one. That might be that could be one. He would be perfect there.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Like
Fox plus CP3. I mean, they started both of them tonight. Plus Wemby plus Vassell. I guess he'd have to play the 3. They'd still kind of struggle at the 4 a little bit. But they could use the shooting for sure. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's get it done. Those
3-0
picks.
3-0 Wizards. I mean, don't bury the lead here. I'm going to be proven right about the trade with the San Antonio Spurs and Cam Johnson, but 3-0 Wizards lead. So that's what we can close out on. It's a disaster.
Wow. Okay. All right. We're going to get out of here. We'll be back after the trade deadline tomorrow to break down what did or didn't happen. Real quick, over under 1.5 Nets players traded tomorrow.
1.5. Oh my God. Under 1.5. Ooh,
yeah.
God.
Over under 0.5.
Over.
Wow, so one player getting traded. Okay, that sounds all right.
All right,
we're gonna get out of here. Make sure
by the way,
subscribe.
Post in the business being able to do the hard math there. Okay, so under 1.5, but over half.
Got it. 1.
3/4 of
a subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Subscribe on YouTube as well.
Honestly, I'm just gonna take the punishment for this. I don't have a quote prepared. This has been a lot of fun for me. Good times all around.
No, stop. We'll wait. Get one. We got a streak going here. We can't.
Right,
we can't break the streak.
And can you vamp for a second here?
So I can't. I usually can. all this time talking.
He just gave the elongated Sue. I can't.
So, yeah, you got something. Let's go.
Yes, of course. I wanted everyone to know that life moves so fast. You got to document the good times, man. And that is our friend, Big Boy.
Oh, one of the all-time great Paul. Back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.